Africa has already, as you know, it has its own vision. In addition to the SDG achievements for 2030, it also has the Agenda 2063. And this year was the beginning of the 10-year program implementation of the Agenda 2063, which is very critical. But it is happening at a time when Africa is facing very serious challenges. One, we have conflicts. You know the Sahel, it's what is going on. We have had coup d'etats. We have Sudan. We have the whole North Africa that is also affected. But at the same time, it is one of the biggest challenges that we have ever seen in our lifetime because of the high indebtedness of the African countries. After the COVID, where many other countries borrowed not for development but also for saving lives, it became even worse because from 2010 to 2022, the debt increased by 192%. That's the highest ever. Right now, African countries are paying 163 billion per year. And of course, when I say 163 billion per year, they are also the debt stock itself is 1.1 trillion, which is very serious. That means that actually by paying the debt, you have no room or very little room to now implement the SDGs, to now implement what is required for the next 10-year program of the African Union, and this is becoming now a challenge. The financing is also becoming a problem, especially the concessional resources that are long-term in nature, that are cheaper. It's very, very difficult to access those kind of resources, and that's why really finding a solution through the reform of the global financing system becomes very urgent and very, very important. There's no room now left for countries that are very much squeezed to implement their own agenda. There is also the big problem of the climate. The climate is costing the African continent 5% of their GDP. Actually, last year for Mozambique, it was 15% because they had a cyclone. So combining now the climate, where you see so much of the drought, so much of the floods happening, and with no resources, the solutions are becoming now almost impossible. We are, as the ECA, we are helping them to really structure their green bonds, the blue bonds, but we need investors in those kind of bonds or sustainability-linked bonds. But at the same time, what has become very serious, because they are looking for alternative, they started now selling carbon. And the carbon credit market is really not in the favor of the Africans. They are now negotiating with people who are experienced, who are purchasing carbon at over $100 per ton in Europe, in North America, and elsewhere. But in Africa, it's less than sometimes less than $5 per ton. You can imagine the gap. So we are assisting them to find a system to have the registries that are assisting them really to be able to negotiate properly, if I may call it that way. Because at that point, we have done it for the Congo Basin Initiative. We have done it for we are now doing it for the island states. And now we are projecting that we also need to take on the countries in the West, in the Sahel. So they are facing a lot of problems in terms of debt, in terms of financing, and also in terms of the climate. And that's why the Summit of the Future is so critical, especially the reform of the international financial architecture, the financing for development conference preparatory meeting that is taking place next week in Addis Ababa is going to become very critical, where we discuss the challenges, where we discuss the solutions as we move to Spain next year, in mid-next year, to discuss really and take decisions on the financing for development. There are also, of course, social security problems, because if you don't have enough resources to finance the social safety net, it becomes also a very serious problem. And that's why the social summit next year is also going to become very useful. So we are here at an opportune moment where we can now, this time, we know the reality. We know that it's not good. We know that also the implementation of the SDGs is also not really going very well. And that's why we are saying we need more resources. We need a relief in terms of the debt, but also we need to understand what we do to address the issues of climate, which is affecting almost everyone.
Africa, from an SDG implementation standpoint, is off track. Only 12% of the 140 targets have been delivered. And he mentioned in a very summarized way, the Africa's challenge: debt, climate, fiscal space. I would add policy space. I do believe that we reach a point that we need to understand the root causes of these problems. So we surf the wave toward a solution, a structural solution. And any conversation around SDG off track and all the problems that my dear colleague Katete mentioned, in my opinion, has to do with something: lack of resilience. Africa, so far, has been able to build resilience to a level that puts Africa in a position to deliver the SDGs in a sustainable way. MDGs have not been delivered, meaning Africa has not delivered resilience. This is the reason that basically together, OSA and ECA, we have been trying to deliver a narrative focused on three main axes. In one of them, maybe the most important one, is financing for development. We have been very clear: to deliver sustainable development, Africa needs to tackle a node sustainable financing. Africa needs to look inside and start understanding that the driver of financing for development should come inside. Resilience, the only way to build resilience. This is the reason that we have in the room three outstanding young Africans with us today. And I would like to take the opportunity to introduce them. Monica Malitz is a refugee youth leader. And Monica's commitment to education and advocacy has been outstanding. Monica, these three Africans with us in the room, they have a common denominator. They have been under very struggling situations, and out of these struggling situations, they have been able to craft their own path to success, which means to resilience. And they are three life examples that resilience can be built, yes, in the African continent. Besides the short-term solutions that are available, SDR's allocation, the need to create liquidity facilities to address the huge deficit in terms of fiscal space in Africa, I do believe that at the same time Africa needs to start tackling long-term solutions. And for me, debt is an example. Africa is in debt distress, as we have been saying, but not because it's over indebtedness. No. I think we need to change that narrative. Africa is in debt distress. Data is there, cannot negate. But because Africa does not control its own economic and financial flows. Why? Weak country systems and weak institutions. It's time to start paying attention to intangible assets as important assets to deliver development. The second one is Vitor. Vitor is, among other things, is a warrior, is a fighter, but is a UN Goodwill Ambassador and member of the UNHCR Global Advisory Group, and there's also a quite amazing journey from resilience to success. And we have with us Victoria, that has been recently appointed chair of the United Nations Voluntary Trust Fund Board for 2024. They are here in this room because they will be available to your questions, not only me and my dear brother Katet, but also these three young, resilient African voices.